Welcome to One Word a Day. I'm Sophie, your pilot into the universe of Chinese. This is the fourth year that I'm doing One Word a Day, totally out of love, out of my spare time. I am glad to share with audience who are really interested in this language, not just for a utilitarian purpose, like, okay, you need it for business or school credit or whatever, but really curious about this culture. And I put this is a globe in Chinese that's bilingual in there. And I put this for this year's Chinese crash course, which is my Christmas gift for you all. That to show really the Chinese is has this a very distinctive feature as a language. And I just checked with ChatGPT that as a logographical language, it's very rare for logographical language to survive through the cultures, histories, and all kinds of turbulence and mutual interactions between cultures, right? Um, so for Chinese, having such big population and influential I'm not sure how influential culturally. I mean, made in China stuff all over the world, but made in China thoughts, and especially its language, it posed a huge barrier for the world to really grasp because it's so different. And so for this year, I'm really after 4 years of looking back at my native tongue, trying to explain to my English audience that I put together some thinking about language itself. Almost look at language as an organism or its own ecosystem thing. And on this globe, I mean, it's a good representation to visualize how out of so many places, names all those names come from somewhere. Somebody named these places something. So it means something to some people, right? And then we Chinese have to, apparently a lot of these are translations by the sound, and we have to make it into Chinese characters. Um, and okay, without further ado, let me get back to the core features of Chinese language. Logographical is how it looks. And that's the main barrier because it looks so different. It's not like you can just remember a ton of vocabulary easily transferable from one phonetic language to another one. You just map different vocabulary, and that's relatively easier transit. But to deal with a logographical, you basically have to learn two things. You both learn the sound and how it looks, how to, if you cannot draw out, you cannot write it, fine. In today's digital age, we just need to type out the sound of it. But the same sound, multiple choices of different characters. Um, so that still pose a barrier. And it turned out, okay, ancient times, ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, um, Aztec, Mayans, they all develop local graphical uh, icons, imagery to capture the physical world. I would have to say probably only Chinese survived all of that. And then Japanese influenced from Chinese culture keep a corner. I don't know, I didn't check what's the percentage of Japanese language, but they carried some of kanjis, so Chinese characters in the Japanese. So that's major to actively using logographical language cultures out there, Chinese and Japanese. And Japanese have majority of the characters phonetics. They are sound makers without looking anything to the physical world, represent the physical world. Versus Chinese is really started by drawing little pictures about the world, and then have to connect the sound to it, and eventually develop a whole system and vocabulary, and still surviving strong in this highly competitive now internationally or globally connected cultures. Um, it pose a challenge to phonetic world language users, but it also creates this other world, other opportunities. And I feel very fortunate to be born into this language so that I start with something um, that I have to gain my vocabulary through a ton of root memorization. But by doing one word a day, I was able to look into why, like what that picture means. And so far, I kind of decoded some of it. And this is an ongoing process. And this is my fourth year kind of stop and look at this language from a little bit far. Okay, so logographic, number one. And as I said, it's a very rare language to survive as a logographical. So in that sense, I'm doing something really special here. Okay, monosyllabic. Okay, it's a logical deduction from logographical because it doesn't depend on the sound. It doesn't have to be multiple syllabic to make a particular meaning connection. We just map one sound to one character, and that one character is a picture of drawing something about the world. So monosyllabic, and normally it's a consonant plus a vowel or by the vowel itself. Um, and here I want to give you a quick example of monosyllabic. In English, you can parse out two part, mono, single, right? Syllabic, sound. In Chinese, we translate as a dan yin jie. Dan is mono. You see, even dan is monosyllabic. Okay. And then yin jie is our translation of the syllabic thing. Yin means sound. Jie means beat. One sound beat. I mean, it's a wholly, totally logical, right? Okay, tonal, because we only have a limited combination of consonant plus vowel, permutations, and it's really limited. So to add another dimension, which is make it into four tones, ah, 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 ah. Then we kind of using the existing combination of consonant plus vowels and then make it into four times more. But still, that is not enough to capture all the Chinese characters. All the little pictures need to have a sound. And we don't have enough sound to match so many different pictures, right? So even at the times four with the tones, it's still overlapping a lot. That's why Chinese is a highly capable language to create puns, simply because we have same pronunciation for so many different things at the same time. And as a language user, you have to distinguish almost like automatic by now, but you really have to read what that character is being used just by hearing it in the context. Okay, Chinese, okay, the last portion of it is about how Chinese connects. So Chinese can probably in some days I'm going to do the clustering of Chinese characters that are logically deduced one from another. In this year, I've done some plant-based or animal-based character, clustering. And you can see that plant-based, a lot of them share the same symbol, or animal-based share like fish, all kinds of fish share the same fish symbol in the component. So logical in the sense of Chinese as a language system would classify things into certain categories, right? There are only limited, I forgot how many, maybe a few dozens of such core components. And they're like Lego pieces. And when they snap together, they create a particular meaning. But you only need to memorize essential components, limited number of that. And then by such combination, so we have sound permutation, and we also have this visuals permutation to create logical meanings you can deduce. So the whole thing of one word a day, I'm trying to unpack one Chinese character into its components, visual components, and try to connect the dots to explain the logic behind the thinking, why these components visually mesh together to create a certain new meaning. So that's the whole thing. So Chinese is logical. For the most part, you can logically deduce. But of course, language is non-linear. It's sometimes I have to put some storytelling and imagination to try to make sense. Contextual. So as I said, same sound, but in different contexts, it's a different characters, different meaning. Even the same character, same sound, it may have multiple meanings, and you have to read really in the context to understand what's the meaning. And I think, well, here's my hypothesis. I haven't tested it out yet, but for language translation, I probably should set it as a pet project that English to Chinese translation wise, probably there are a lot of such translation challenges, even in our age of auto translation, because it's two languages so different, and because Chinese is so contextual. Even if what is called attention is all you need. Ever since then, this transformer thing is mapping out how to understand a particular element in language, a particular word through the context, right? By paying different attention weights in the context. So by looking one thing, almost like looking at one thing, one person by looking at the friends of the person, so that you can understand the person, him or herself better, right? So even ChatGPT or our currently popular translation tools have such capacity. I wonder what's the limits. So because of Chinese, it's highly contextual. Some things human understand, machines may not get it yet. Okay, non-inflectional, and this is because Chinese piece together meanings, icon, 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 and somehow the language doesn't need the support. Okay, English have major vocabularies and small words. So almost like in English, we construct language, meaning versus grammatically correct. And these small words are like glues to glue these thoughts, pearls of thoughts together. Chinese don't require that. We just lump all the meaning words together without such gluey words. That small words function. So in that sense, we don't need to do that. And non-inflectional, like Chinese, we don't need to specify gender or time, or it's singular or plural. Don't bother with that at all. We actually have simpler solutions for any of that. So in that sense, it's a lot easy to learn. You don't have to remember is table female or male. Okay. Now, 北京元素 means Beijing element. Again, I put Chinese and English next to each other to show how different they look. And each one, Beijing, North capital means Beijing. 元素, the element, particles, or components. So 元素 is our element translation. I want to compare English and Chinese. I've done this before, but I have some new insights here this year, that all the languages, either English or Chinese, that we're currently using are the survivors linguistically. And the language as an ecosystem, as anything, almost like a business, right? The business survival rate, the newly found business to survive another year, another 5 years, all that, right, is extremely low. So is language. So is vocabulary. I mean, language-wise as well, right? Just like a species. Species come and go. And languages come and go, even if on different time scale, right? Enough of cultures of peoples disappeared, through history on this just planet one of humans here, right? So language too is survival of the fittest rule, survival rate 2%, not that high. And why I say 2%? It's supported by data here. So historically existed ever 1 million English vocabularies. And we're now individually actively using only 20,000. That's a 2% ratio. And of course, in dictionary, it captures a lot more than individual ones. But individual, because of how, I guess, how we use our language or we acquire vocabulary because we need to use them. So in our individual usage, the application of language only need 20,000%. Chinese even fewer, 8,000 for college educated, and historically existed 270,000. And again, that's a 2.1% survival rate. So roughly, both languages, survivors, 2%. So I would say take a good look at every English or Chinese words and appreciate they are really the survivors of this two surviving languages, okay? Survivor of the survivors. Okay, so I also note the ratio of the two language. You see the vocabulary-wise, English versus Chinese, 20,000 actively individual using versus 8,000 is a 5-to-2 ratio. And we see that in this exercise, which is I ask ChatGPT, give me all the vocabulary in English and Chinese to describe a color blue. And ChatGPT came out with 55 English expressions of color blue versus Chinese 22. That's 5-to-2 ratio, exactly 5-to-2 ratio. So that's an interesting observation of English have a 5-to-2, like bigger, 2.5 bigger size of vocabulary by individuals. Probably because Chinese have this amazing ability of like Lego block-ish, vocabulary to existing, even if it's a smaller vocabulary, but the combination. And Chinese are used to create new expressions with existing blocks to create new meanings. And we don't have to expand our existing vocabulary. We just, combine into making new finished Lego pieces in that sense. Okay, so you can see blue, right? Blue is the defining character. And then we have a variety of blue, baby, navy, royal, Prussian, Byzantine. So these are, okay, baby is habitually, right, customly baby blue, certain color on babies. And then navy, royal, they are organizations, right? And then Prussian, Byzantine, TM, they are also organizations as well, but they're empires, particular to that empire use. And then sapphire, azure, and cobalt, cerulean. I didn't know to pronounce all of them. But these are natural material elements. And the sky wash is my newly learned. I wonder if this is the sky wash color right there. But these are somewhere from nature that we notice is in the blue category, but it has a particular tone of the blue that's associated with that particular material. And so English capture all that material and all that places or organizations that use a particular kind of color. So this strong association with entities, either out there in nature or within the society, organized a certain way, right? And then associated with a certain color, and English got 55 of those. Chinese, on the other hand, we have two major blue characters, which is lan and qing. And with each, we have a combination of 天蓝, 海蓝, 湖蓝, which is a sky blue, ocean blue, lake blue, right? Again, environmental colors that you can find, I guess, sky wash would be this 天蓝, right? And then whatever we can find in nature, we associate that kind of. But again, 天蓝, the sky can blue in a variety of ways. The sky, looking at the different altitudes, may look different colors as well. And the same as the ocean. As I travel to different places, I notice the tropical ocean really look different from further north or south. Not that I have been to southern kind of hemisphere yet, but different location really have a distinctively different color to that region. Chinese is not that specific. We only see categorically, is it like sky, ocean, or lake? And then these 靛蓝, 黛蓝, 湛蓝, 宝蓝, these are some pigments or dye or minerals that we extracted in the past to specify that that's the particular dye, color, or gemstone things. And Chinese have this peacock blue. I mean, isn't that nice? Peacock have a particular type of feather color that we call it out. That's the peacock blue. And then we have a gemstone blue. I guess that's associated with sapphire or that. And then we have qing. Qing is in ancient time blue color. And as general, this lan is plant-based. So it's probably associated with a certain plant-based dye, something like indigo, right? And then qing is our porcelain, Chinese porcelain, China. Okay, China is the main product from China in the ancient world. That's China, right? So it's the same as the country name. So China as the porcelain then have a particular kind of a blue color, and that is qing. And qing is simply the color of life. I talked about that before. The color of life used on both water and mountains. That's where lives are, both in water and land. And then we have Zang Qing, Dian Qing, Tian Qing, again, sky, but Qing is supposedly a little bit different, right? And Dian Lan Qing, so these are dye color, and Lan Qing even combine the two. So whoever works in a particular, I guess, color industry can probably differentiate the subtle tones, just like layers of different blues. But here I want to call out both English and Chinese. Pink, this associate, this blue is the abstract of our, into our language. It tied to physical world by referring, lan is a big category, right? And then when we come to specific tones of lan, then we pin it down to particular physical things in the world, environmentally physical things or organization associate themselves with that. So it's kind of a branding, right? So just like famous Tiffany blue, right? The Tiffany color, everybody knows, is a branding effort to pin down a particular color that can be not digitally, but reproduced accurately to represent that brand. So organizations or natural materials associated with that, then we have this particular point. And different cultures have different sensibility to colors, and they have different color differentiations. And you can see here, just like the language ratio, English have bigger vocabulary, have 5:2 ratio, even comes to describing the color blue. And my other theory is English is more, as a language, as a culture, is more interconnected with the rest of the world. And so they have Prussian and Byzantium blue associated to a far away country or empire in the past. They must have have enough people seeing those cultures to be able to create this vocabulary so that people who both visited Prussia before can know, like, it's in their language. They know. For me, unless I check, I wouldn't know how that blue looks like, right? And then Chinese is relatively landlocked, even if it got Silk Road, but that's a tiny stream of trade of goods, of ideas, right? So Chinese relatively landlocked and doesn't have a worldly reference of different sources of blue to differentiate the different, minutiae of blue. Okay, and in the new year, I plan to look at the language in epochs of historians' classification of civilization, from all the way from Paleolithic age, which are examples of one, E, and then Neolithic, farm field, right? And then we have equestrian related to army, to equestrian related to horse. And because of horse incorporated in the military technology back then, and then associated with its carriage or chariot. And that is what's made of this army sense character. And then classical, the big empire age, of course, we have principal Gang, and then we have ocean-faring age, which is mostly Western civilization. Chinese explored oceans briefly and then locked itself up. I don't know why. So, well, in history historians came up all kind of explanations of why Chinese locked themselves in to a tiny part of the world and be just content with that instead of exploring outward. Even if the technology-wise, they got it. So I don't know why. Okay, whale is, I guess, ancient, ocean era, and then industrial age, of course, make. Made in China. If you see made in China, this character you must have seen on the label. Okay, and digital age, intelligence, so AI, so that's 智. All of these we've talked before, but I want to regroup the language to look at it from the lens of history of 7 epochs. All right, so this is a classical Chinese view. Language is the currency of thinking, and I'm really trying hard to decode this currency that we've been using. I guess by talking about Chinese, I'm basically doing English a little bit of reflection as well, because both English and Chinese are 2 major currencies of thinking, and I'm doing this transitioning thing, looking at one from the other one's perspective, so that we become more self-aware as language users. We're not just using what's given, passed down to us, generations, but we're really thinking about this language, where it came from, and then what originally that means and how it transformed itself, readapt to new situations. So language vocabularies, the survivors of in the 2% survivors, they are the super adapters. They have to adapt to the new context that humans are living, therefore still can be relevant to our daily lives. That's how they survive, right? So all that are, amazing, fascinating aspects of languages, and I hope you enjoy the ride with me. I'll see you next year. Last few days of the year, and I will see you next year from the lens of history. Thank you for your time. See you another.